Well, good morning. Guys have a good week? All right, good. I hope so. Well, hey, we've got financial peace. You just watched the video on financial peace. We are starting that on May 10th. So if that's something you're interested, Tuesday, May 10th at 6:30. So if that's something you're interested in, please let us know. You can stop by the Got Questions table after church and find out more information about that, about when and where that's going to be meeting. But something we rolled out as part of our Vision Sunday. That's part of the roots and fruits that we've talked about on Vision Sunday, and it's something that we want to offer to you guys to help you. And we've had actually already a lot of interest in that. So certainly something we want to be able to get started. But hopefully you guys have had a great week. We are going to be talking about a subject today I think that's near and dear to everybody's heart, and it's something that probably we all deal with. But hopefully you guys have had a great week. I don't know what kind of week you've had, and chances are, in a congregation this size, that probably not everyone in here has had a fantastic week. I mean, I don't know if I asked for a show of hands, there would probably be some that would say, yes, Trent, yes. And I would say, yes, I see that hand. You've had a great week. But I love that joke. Never gets old. Yes, I see that hand. Some of you would raise your hand and say, you know what? I have not had a great week. It's not been the greatest of weeks, and things have not gone the greatest. And, we all the times we talk about there are periods in our life where we have mountaintops and we have valleys. And I've used the saying of a lady that was in our first church. She would always tell my dad, her name was Miss Cartwright. She took care of me when I was little. And she would always say, she said, she'd always tell my dad would say, how are you, Miss Cartwright? And she'd say, well, I live on the mountaintop, but I'm not always home. and it was, we all have those times when we have these mountaintop experiences, and then we go into the valley of our lives, and things happen suddenly, and that changes quickly. And so I want to share with you this morning, I want to talk to you about a couple experiences, a couple stories in the Bible where people had mountaintop experiences, literally on top of a mountain, and visited with God and had experiences with God. And so I want to start with that. And the first one is pretty simple. The one that we probably are most familiar with is Moses, right? He on Mount Sinai. And if you look in Exodus chapter 32, 27 through 29, you have the account of this story and what happens. And so what happens, just to kind of give you some background if you don't know, Moses went up to Mount Sinai and went on this mountain up to Mount Sinai and had an experience with God, and God gave him the 10 Commandments. And so he had this experience, this awesome mountaintop experience with God, where he experienced God in all of his presence, and then handed Moses these tablets, these 10 Commandments to come down to the people of the Israelites. And so what happened was, while Moses was up on this mountaintop experience, all of the Israelites had really been bad. And they had made this golden calf, and they had gotten tired of waiting on Moses to come down, and they were like, hey, we need to worship something. And so they made this golden calf and were really just turning their back on God that had rescued them out of Egypt. And so we pick up this story when Moses comes down off of the mountain and starts to head into the valley and coming down off the Mount Sinai. And so let me read this to you real quick. It says, Moses told them, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each of you take your sword. And so he'd come down, he'd found all these people basically just with this golden calf. And so this was Moses' reaction. He said, this is what the Lord of the God of Israel says. Each of you take your swords, go back and forth from one end of the camp to the other, kill everyone, even your brothers, friends, and neighbors. The Levites obeyed Moses' command, and about 3,000 people died that day. That's impressive. Then Moses told the Levites, today you have ordained yourselves for the service of the Lord, for you obeyed him, even though it meant killing your own sons and brothers. Today you have earned a blessing. What an uplifting story that is, isn't it? Wow. Where are you going to go with that, Trent? Well, let me tell you. I'm going to a conference this week in Atlanta, and I'm looking forward to it. But when I come back, and if I find that you guys have been bad, it's going to get ugly. And I may ask you to do some really ugly... No, just kidding. But that's like Old Testament, right? That's like hardcore. 3,000 people, brothers, your own sons. I mean, God went hard. It was hardcore. Moses, and I wanted to, it was his reaction. His reaction was, and God's reaction at that point in time in the law, we had the law of Moses, and his reaction was basically, let's kill everybody that was bad. Let's punish everybody. We're going to punish, you're going to be punished bad for your bad sins, and for all that you've done, we're just going to, literally, 3,000 people. Unreal. Second story. I want to go to the second story, mountaintop story. So here's one story. Moses on the mountaintop comes down to the valley. It's really bad. It's ugly. Kills everybody. Second story. Jesus. If you look in Mark, right before this, in Mark 9, verse 14, but in Mark chapter, if you look right before the passage that I'm going to read, Jesus had been on the Mount of Transfiguration. So a little bit of background. Jesus had been on the Mount of Transfiguration with Peter, James, and John. And so what some of you are thinking, what is the Mount of Transfiguration? Well, Jesus went up to this mount. He was transfigured. He turned bright white. Peter, James, and John actually got to witness that, and they were like, oh, that's weird. And they saw Jesus talking to Moses and Elijah. Okay, this was on the Mount of Transfiguration. This is what happened. So they had this, so Peter, James, and John were with Jesus. They had this amazing experience on top of the mountain. They'd been with God. They'd saw God talk, or they'd see God and Moses and Jesus talking together. And Peter, the Bible says that they were afraid. They were scared of what they had seen. And Peter was like, he was kind of, they said he was frightened, but he was like, it was great to be here. What do you say? You're about to die. I don't know. He was scared. He said, it was great to be here with you, Jesus. But they had this awesome mountaintop experience. And so they had they're coming down from this awesome experience on the Mount of Transfiguration. And this is what happens. And so we pick up the story in Mark chapter 9, verse 14. It says, when they returned to the other disciples, so they were coming down to meet up with the other disciples, they saw a large crowd standing around them, and some teachers of religious laws were arguing with them. When the crowd saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with awe, and they ran to greet him. And Jesus said, what is all of this arguing about? We're going to continue the story, but I just wanted to call out the comparison. So you had in the Old Testament, Moses, he has his mountaintop experience, comes down, finds a bunch of nonsense going on, kills everybody. Jesus, on the mountaintop experience, comes down into the valley, sees a bunch of people arguing and throwing a fit, but his reaction is different. Jesus' reaction isn't, hey, let's kill everybody. He asks a question. Hey, what's all this arguing? What's this arguing about? And so we pick this story up. But both Jesus and Moses both had things to deal with when they came into the valley. And so my point is, how we choose to deal with those things will make a huge difference in our lives. So we have these mountaintop experiences in our lives, but we come off of that mountaintop and we go through rough patches in our life and we go through difficult things in our life. How we choose to deal with that makes all the difference. And so we're going to dig into this one. Here's the thing. We're going to dig into this story a little bit. Have you ever had that one thing that's in your life that just drives you crazy, or it's that one thing that no matter how hard you try, no matter how difficult, no matter how hard you try, you've tried everything, you've done everything, no matter how hard you try, you just can't get past it. It's that one thing in your life, and it's probably different for us. I know the one thing for me are my socks. No matter how many pair I buy, no matter how many times I go to Walmart and buy socks, I never have socks in my drawer. They go through one cycle of the laundry and they are gone. I kid you not, I have bought like 40 pairs of socks this year. And this morning I got up and I was searching high and low. And here's the problem, my family wears my socks. I guarantee if you make my family take their shoes off today, they will have a pair of my socks. I took a picture of my wife with my socks on. I'm like, buy your own socks. People in Walmart have to think, seriously, you're buying socks again? Yeah, I know. I need socks. So you need to get me anything, buy me socks. But it's that one thing, and maybe that is. Maybe it's, it's that one thing we're doing. Maybe it's bigger than socks, but it's that one thing that consumes you. In all seriousness, we have that one thing. It occupies your mind. It keeps you awake at night. It's something that you continually deal with your whole life. Perhaps it's a family member or a relationship. Maybe it's an addiction or a habit that keeps rearing its ugly head. Maybe it's a job that you've been looking for, but you just can't seem to get a break and you can't get that. It just always seems out of your reach. Or it's an illness that you're facing or something that you've just been diagnosed with. Maybe it's something that you're carried for a long time. Maybe it's something that's new. Maybe it's something that you've prayed for forever. Maybe it's something that you hope can be corrected or mended. Maybe it's whatever it is, it's that one thing. It's that one thing in your life that you say, man, if only we have that if only statement. If only I could fix this part of my life. If only this would be corrected. If only I could get my arms wrapped around this thing. If only I could stop doing that. If only it's that if only statement. I get tangled up in this thing every Sunday. But it's that if only God would take this from me, if God would make this happen, if only God would heal me. It's that one thing in your life. And it's not uncommon. Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 talks about his thing. And he had what he called a thorn in the flesh. And he says this, even though I have received such wonderful revelations from God, so to keep me from being proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me and to keep me from being proud. So here's the thing. I believe that all of us have that one thing. We all have that one thing in our life, that thorn in the flesh, that one thing. And that whatever it is for each one of you, and I don't know what it is for you, but you all have that one thing. It's just that thing that just pulls you away, keeps you wrestling within yourself. It's all that one thing. Regardless of who we are, we have that one thing. So we pick up this story, and it's no different. So Jesus, up on the Mount of Transfiguration, and he comes down, and he sees this crowd arguing, and he sees these religious leaders arguing. And here's what they're arguing about. We pick it up again in verse 17. And it says, one of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, "Teacher, I have brought my son so you could heal him. He is possessed by an evil spirit that won't let him talk. And whenever the spirit seizes him, it throws him violently onto the ground. Then he foams at the mouth, and he grinds his teeth, and he becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast out the evil spirit, but they could not do it." So here's this picture of Jesus, and Jesus and Peter, James, and John have just had this amazing experience. He comes down into the valley, and he sees all of these people arguing, and he sees this guy, and finally he asks him, "What's going on?" And this guy steps up and says, "Hey, it's about my son, Jesus. I got this kid. He's been demon-possessed. I can't do anything with him. It sometimes, and if you read it, it talks about it. Sometimes the demon throws him into the fire, or it throws him into water to try to drown his son. And it's his one thing. It's his one thing. Jesus, it's this one thing. I've got this son that needs your help. And it's this dad that had tried everything. It's this teenage kid. He'd tried everything. He'd done everything he could to try to be a good dad and to try to protect his son. It was just that one thing. And you ever notice that we often try absolutely everything before we turn to Jesus? Do you ever notice that? We try to work it out in our mind when we have that thing, when we come down off the mountain and we have that one thing, and it's that one thing that keeps us from experiencing Christ the fullest. Here's the thing, he thought he brought his son to Jesus, but if you read through that story, he had really brought his son to the disciples. Because Jesus was on the Mount of Transfiguration, so he brought his son to the disciples. And if you read through that passage, he said, "Hey, I asked your disciples to cast this demon out, but they couldn't do it." So he thought he had brought his son to Jesus. He said, I brought my son so that he could be healed. But in reality, he had brought his son to the disciples. And I think just like that father, some of us think that we have brought our thing to Jesus, but we've only really brought it to church with us. There's a difference. You have that thing in your life and that temptation or whatever that is in your life that you're wrestling with, and you think, well, I've brought it to Jesus. When in reality, you haven't really brought it to Jesus. You brought it to Trent or to Grace Nazarene. Don't bring it to me. Bring it to Jesus. He's the only one that can fix it. Do you think we've prayed about it? Sometimes, I hear people say, well, I prayed about it. Have you really? Have you really prayed about it, or have you just thought about it a lot? It consumes your mind. Well, I think about it a lot. Doesn't mean you've prayed about it a lot. Doesn't mean you've asked Jesus to help you with it. Whatever our thing is, we need to bring it to Jesus, not to religion or others. So we pick up the story, verse 19. Jesus said to them, you faithless people. I love Jesus' words there. Have you ever been there? How long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring this boy to me. You ever been there? Have you ever been frustrated? Jesus was clearly frustrated by their lack of faith. He's like, we don't know what to do. We've asked Jesus, you can't. And Jesus comes down and says, he's just kind of frustrated. Have you ever done that? Have you ever had people just not trust you about anything? With you anything? You're the type of person that the party starts at 6, but they tell you to be there at 5:15. And you show up at 5:15, you're like, why am I the only one here? Well, we told you to be here early because we knew you'd be late. We do that with my sister-in-law. But you ever have that? You're like, why don't you trust me? I got it. Cheryl will do that too. Hey, do you know? Did you remember? Yes, honey, I remember. Well, I just didn't think you would remember. We do that to each other. We don't trust each other. And that's kind of the way they were treating Jesus. They just didn't trust him. He's frustrated. So we pick up the story at verse 20. It says, so they brought the boy, but when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a violent convulsion, and he fell on the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth. That is an awesome scene, isn't it? Mark was going to act that out for me today. Object lesson. But if you saw that happen, you would be like, oh my word. You would probably be so terrified. If we saw that happen today, if somebody came up here and I said, hey, bring the boy up here, and he fell on the floor and started foaming at the mouth, and we'd be calling 911, we'd be doing, we'd be freaking out if we saw that today. This boy lays on the ground, and this is the beautiful part of this story. I love this part of the story. So here's my question. Here's that. I want you to get a picture of that scene. We've got that kid. He just throws himself on the ground. He starts foaming. I've seen that actually in the toy aisle at Walmart. I felt like I needed to come out of him. Lay hands on him right there. Other kind of hands. My dad would have laid hands on me. It's a different kind of laying on of hands. It's a similar reaction when, we get that when adults don't get their way. They throw themselves on the ground and foam at the mouth and freak out. We take a phone away from a teenager. Same thing. But you have this picture. So my question is to you this morning, what is it that throws you on the ground, that disables you, that causes you to shake violently? What is it that pulls you away? What is it that just cripples you? Is it that diagnosis? Is it that addiction? Is that broken relationship? What is it that cripples you? What is your thing? The Father's thing was this son. I need you to fix this, Jesus. This is my thing. If only you would fix this. And here's what I love. What is it that throws us, Is it bitterness? Is it fear, pride? Is it a memory, a doubt, a diagnosis, a temptation? So they have this scene, and this boy's throwing himself on the ground, and here's what I love. Jesus says, you just get this picture of Jesus. This kid is throwing himself on the ground. He's writhing, he's wiggling around, and he's foaming at the mouth. And so Jesus just looks at the dad and says, verse 21, how long has this been happening? He doesn't freak out. He doesn't go, oh my word, that's horrible. I can't deal with that. He just looks at him and goes, so how long has that been happening? I love that. He's so calm. He doesn't freak out. Let me tell you something. Jesus is not overwhelmed, and God is not intimidated by your messy situation. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you've going on. I don't care if the doctors have told you you've got this much time to live. I don't care what it is. God is not overwhelmed by your thing. He doesn't freak out over it. It doesn't send him into panic mode. He just says, oh, how long has that been happening? Don't you love that? Whenever we are dealing with something in our valley, we can lift our eyes up to Jesus, who is above us, knowing that he has the power to come down and save us. He's not overwhelmed by your messy thing. I love that. The story gets better, if you can imagine. I love it. I love the dad's reaction here. Such a picture of us. And so Jesus asked him, hey, how long has this been happening? And so the father says, he replied, since he was a little boy, which gives us the implication that he's probably an older kid. He's probably in his teens. He's probably a teenager. He said, how long has that been happening? Father says, since he was a little boy. The Spirit often throws him into fire or into water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us if you can. Seriously? Don't you love that? How many times is that a picture of us? You're seriously going to look at Jesus in the face and say, yes, please help me. We're desperate. Help me if you can, Jesus. If you think you can. Seriously, you're going to say that to Jesus? If you can? Since he was a little bit, I can understand thinking it, and I just wonder how many times do some of us come down here and we pray about our thing, and really, if we were honest in our truth, in the back of our minds, we're thinking, yeah, he's probably not going to help me with this. In the back of our minds, we're thinking, here it is, Jesus, help me if you can. I don't really think you can. Don't you love that? Why do we do that? It's our unbelief. I don't know, was he trying to do some kind of weird reverse psychology on Jesus? I do that stuff with little kids. Bet you can't brush your teeth. Oh, yes, I can. I'll show you. Is that what he was trying to pull off? What was he trying to do with Jesus? We do that. I did something a couple weeks ago that I'm not proud of. A couple months ago, we had some kids living with us for a while, and they were smaller children, and we got TP'd. And so I needed help picking up the yard. And so I just did that whole reverse thing. Hey, who wants to play a game? Let's see who can pick up the most toilet paper and win. And they loved it. They were out there picking up toilet paper. Didn't feel good about it. But it worked. If you can do anything, the Father had faith, but he just couldn't believe. He had faith. He wanted Jesus. He knew if he brought his son to Jesus, there might be a possibility. There might be something he could do, but he just said, if you can. Has anybody ever done that to you? Well, I don't know if you can do it, but there it is. You say that to my wife, she's the most competitive person on earth. Don't do that to her. You'll come up on losing end. Don't go canoeing with my wife. She has to be the lead canoe. Paddle. Bet we can't beat. If you can do anything. The father had faith, but he was begging for scraps. He was asking Jesus for anything. His faith was in survival desperation mode. He was looking to get any kind of relief he could. We looked at anything that will numb our pain for just a second, that will just take the pain away for just a minute. God, if you could just do this for a second, if you can, and our belief is just about that big. Our faith is about that big. And that's where the Father's faith was. And I love Jesus' response. Next verse, verse 23, you know what Jesus says to him? What do you mean? If I can. I love that response. Jesus asked, and he said, anything is possible if a person believes. Do you really believe that Jesus can help you with your thing? Or do you think he just can't? Are you asking Jesus, are you bringing that thing in your life, whatever it is, that temptation, that addiction, that broken relationship, that diagnosis, are you bringing it to Jesus? Or are you bringing it to him and just saying, you know what, God, if you can, help me. If you think you can. That's about how big we think God is. But here's the thing. After Jesus says that, he says, what do you mean if I can? Jesus asked. And instantly, the Father knew how dumb that sounded. You ever done that? You ever prayed a prayer and go, okay, yeah, you're God. I got it. Help me to have a little bit of faith here. Instantly, he began to backpedal. And instantly the Father's like, oh, no. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. You ever done that? Oh, I didn't mean for it to come. I didn't mean it to sound like that, Jesus. But instantly, Jesus knew right to the heart. He saw right to the heart of the Father. And in the next verse, he says, the Father instantly cried out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. The Father's thing, and here's the thing, I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in our thing, and we think that, that our thing is the biggest thing else. But Jesus has a way of getting underneath our thing and finding the real thing. You ever notice that? The Father's thing was to have his son healed. That was all was on his focus. His focus was, hey, I need to get my son healed, period. That's what I need to fix. But Jesus was more interested in healing the Father's unbelief than he was healing the kids. That's nothing for Jesus. He's like, I can do that. I'm more concerned that you don't believe that I can. You ever notice that? How many of us are wrestling with things that we feel like, you know what? This is my thing, God. This is the thing. I need you to fix this thing. I need you to fix this thing. And Jesus is looking at you going, no, you need to fix that thing. You need to fix that thing. You need to fix your unbelief. That's what you need to fix. Before God gives us what we want, he wants to give us what we really need. And you know what we really need? Jesus. That's what we really need. Story picks up verse 25 and 26. It says, when Jesus saw that the crowd of onlookers was growing, he rebuked the evil spirit. Listen, you spirit that makes this boy unable to hear and speak, he said, I command you to come out of this child and never enter him again. And then the spirit screamed and threw the boy into another violent convulsion and left him. The boy appeared to be dead, and a murmur ran through the crowd as people said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and helped him to his feet, and he stood up. That's what happens when we bring our stuff to Jesus. and you come down off a mountaintop. And I know many of us have things going on in our life. You know, one thing about being a pastor, you kind of get to see and hear what's going on in people's junk that people have going on in their life. We have things that are going on in our lives. And I think a lot of times we look around and Jesus begins to do something in our lives and everybody around us is going, man, he's dead. Woo. He ain't never going to overcome that. He's a goner. And they look at things going on in our life. We have a tendency to look around and go, man, glad that's not me. When other people see it and your friends start peeling off and they're peeling away and they're going a different direction. But Jesus looks down, he reaches down, and he picks you up, stands you up, a new person. You know, I've been focused on so much, and we get focused on so much stuff, and there's so many good things that you can get your head clouded with. You know, and even in the church, you know, we have Starting Point, and we have CR, and we've got, you know, Financial Peace University, and we've got grow groups, and we've got children's programs, and we've got youth programs, and we've got Crave, and we've got Youth Loop, and we've got big stuff, and we got church, and we got worship teams, and we've got all of this stuff. And it's all good stuff. It really is. But you know what we really need? Jesus. Period. It's really simple. We complicated it, church. We think we need all this stuff. We just need Jesus. That's it. Seek me first and everything will be added, it said. Seek me first and everything will be added. And the older I get, and the more I study, and the more I read through the scriptures, and the more I read stories like this, I'm convinced that the only thing that I have to do, we have a tendency to complicate it in the church. And as the new Christians come in, it's overwhelming for new Christians. Because you think, all of a sudden, you've got this laundry list of things that you have to do. I've got to do this, I got to read my Bible, I got to show up to church, I got to do this, I got to quit doing this, this, and this, and that list of stuff that you got to quit doing is a mile long. And you're like, man, it's overwhelming. And you leave here and you think, you know what, this is going to be a better week, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a better person, and I'm going to do things differently, and I'm going to live for Christ. And then you get out there on Monday and Tuesday, and then by Wednesday you're trashed again. And eventually you say, you know what, this is a joke, I can't do it. But you know why? Because we're focused on trying to do everything. The Father had done absolutely everything he could for his Son. We have that one thing, and we think we're going to try all of this other stuff. And I don't care. There's no amount of counseling. There's no amount of books or anything else. I'm convinced that the only thing that's going to help us is if we focus on Jesus. Period. What's that look like, Trent? What's that like? That means you get up and you say, you know what, Jesus? I want to focus on you. I'm just going to pray. I'm going to read my Bible. I'm just going to try to find out who you are. So really, the big question that we have to answer ultimately is, who is Jesus? Who is he to you? Not who is he to me. Not who is he to your husband or your wife or your kids or the preacher. Who is he to you? Are you bringing your stuff to him? Or are you bringing it to somebody else? I'll talk to you about it. I'll pray for you, but I can't fix it. You know who fixes it? Jesus. But he's going to get under the other thing. We have to get beyond what we think the thing is and focus on what we really need. I'm going to ask the band to come. A few more points here. Jesus has a way of getting beneath the thing. When we bring our thing to Jesus, he will change our hearts. He will heal our unbelief. He will heal our lack of unbelief. He will heal our pride. What is the real issue that Jesus needs to help you with? I think Scripture tells us one of the greatest prayers that we can pray, and I'm convinced that one of the greatest prayers that we can pray in our life right now is just an earnest, from the pit of our heart, from the depths of our being, is a cry for help. Help me, Jesus. It's a simple prayer. Really is. Ultimately what we need. Help me, Jesus. Have you ever been to that point of desperation that this father was in? He'd absolutely tried everything. It had to be exhausting watching his son go through that. I can't imagine anything worse than seeing your son or your daughter or your kids, and those that are parents know that feeling. There's nothing worse than seeing your kids sick or hurt. I can't imagine the father's agony that he would have had. Just at a point of literally desperation. I don't think this is going to work, but Jesus, can you help me? When that's where we need to be starting. We need to be starting right there, not ending there. See, the father was asking for anything. He said, just give me anything that you do, Jesus. He would have taken anything. You ever get to that point? Hey, I'll make it go away for a couple weeks. Yes. Probably father would have said, yes, thank you. A couple of weeks of peace. Yes, that would be great. Whew. If I didn't have to be up all hours tonight wondering if he's going to throw himself into the lake. Wondering if he's going to throw himself into the fire and I'll wake up and find him dead. I can't imagine what was going through this. He was looking for anything. Anything you can do, Jesus, would help me. Please. But instead, we ask for anything, but God gives us everything. He wants to give us everything, not just anything. I'm going to ask you to stand this morning. Jesus doesn't offer anything. He offers everything. He wants to give us absolutely everything. And the difference, I don't know if you noticed, if you made that parallel, but the difference, everything that Moses couldn't offer through the law of Moses, he couldn't offer everything that Moses did. When he came down and he killed everybody, Moses' response was, hey, let's kill everybody. Let's punish them for what they've done. Moses' reaction was to kill the rebellious people, punish them for their unbelief. And Jesus' reaction was to heal and restore. What the law of Moses was powerless to do, God did through Jesus Christ himself, and that's to bring life. And he wants to bring life to each one of us. If we would just bring our thing, or what we think our thing is, to Jesus, and let him point out the areas in our life that we need to make different, he can change it all. I ask you to pray and bow your heads this morning. I know for a fact that some of you are going through very difficult circumstances right now. I know there are things in your life that you are just at your wits' end with. And I want you to just take a few minutes in the quietness of this room. I'm not going to have Jeremy sing some kind of invitation song. It's just about you and Jesus. What is it that you need to bring to Jesus? And lay at his feet and believe that he can take care of it. I'm going to ask you to pray with me this morning. These altars are open if you need to come pray. Somebody will pray with you, or you can pray by yourself. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for your love and your grace and your patience with us, Lord, even though that we lack faith sometimes and we lack unbelief and we have a spirit of unbelief and we think that we could never possibly overcome what we're facing. But God, help us to know that you can do it. Help us to believe with our hearts and trust you. Help us to get underneath the thing and really understand what it is that we need. Lord, there's a need at this altar this morning, God, and I just lift them up. God, I just pray that you would just come into this place, that your Holy Spirit would be real, that we could experience your grace and your forgiveness and your healing touch. Help us to believe with our whole heart that you could work through it. Thank you, Jesus, for who you are. Thank you for loving us. God, I just pray, I lift up the needs of our church. I pray for those people that have needs. God, rest in this presence with us, Lord, as we continue to pray. I'm going to ask those that would come, just come pray if you would like to. If you don't, if you would just have a seat. Ask Jeremy just to sing through a verse of this song while we pray. If you guys would, you could be seated. Be in a spirit of prayer.